Solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded sounds impossible, but in some ways, it's actually easier than solving it with your eyes open. And even though it has over 43 quintillion possible combinations, you can solve it all by doing one simple technique over and over again. So what is this technique, and how is this even possible? To explain this, let's say there's 8 friends, and each friend has bought a gift for another friend. The goal is for everyone to give each gift to the right person, but each person can only hold one gift at a time. Just like how on a Rubik's Cube, there's always exactly one piece in each spot. You can't have just 2 or none. One simple way to give all the gifts back is to have someone act as the middleman. Let's pick this guy and call him Aaron. And while we're at it, we'll give everyone else a name too and just shorten them all to one letter. So here's how it works. Aaron gives his gift to the person it belongs to, then takes whatever gift they were holding, and you just keep repeating that until Aaron gets his gift. You'll notice that even though Aaron is just swapping gifts one at a time, you can see a pathway that the gifts follow. And since we already know all gifts go through Aaron first, we can get rid of these arrows so it looks simpler, and rearrange it like so. This is called a cycle. But you'll notice that in this case, after Aaron gets his gift back, there are still 3 people who haven't gotten their gifts yet. One way to deal with this is to pick someone else to be the middleman, let's say Philip, and do the same thing again. This works because his gift is part of another cycle of gifts that haven't been given to the right people yet. But if we want to keep it simple and keep Aaron as the middleman, he can swap gifts with someone who hasn't gotten theirs yet. It doesn't matter who. That might seem like it makes things worse, but notice how Aaron is now part of this new cycle. And once everyone in this new cycle has received their gifts, Aaron will once again get his gift back as well. Now of course, if you are watching the Rubik's Cube closely, you'll know you can't just swap around 2 pieces like that without taking the cube apart. But there is a way. While each move swaps around 8 pieces at a time, if you do a lot of them in a specific way, until you're left with just 2 corners swapped. Sure, this sequence of moves called an algorithm is quite long, but the good news is that you only need to learn one to solve all of the corners. As you saw before, this algorithm swaps the pieces in the A and P spots. So like how Aaron swaps gifts with Philip. But what if we want to swap what's in the A and L spots instead? Well, we can set up the L spot to where the P spot is, then do the swap algorithm. So that when we undo the setup move, A and L will swap. So if we showed the last part of what we did before, it'd look like this. We swap what's in the A and P spots, which doesn't require any setup move, making A join the cycle, then A with L, A with S, which requires 2 setup moves, then, of course, A with P once more. You'll notice the algorithm doesn't just swap these 2 corners, but also these 2 edges with each other, because swapping only 2 pieces at a time on a Rubik's Cube is impossible without cheating. But as long as we don't move them during setup moves, they cancel themselves out after an even number of swaps. And you can use the same technique not just solving the corners, but also the edges. So in other words, the entire Rubik's Cube. You just need another spot to become the middleman, or as it's usually called, the buffer. Another swap spot, and 2 new dummy pieces that are now corners instead. And with another algorithm that swaps all these pieces around, we can solve all of the edges. I'll show a few with the following example. For instance, setting up the H spot to a new swap spot. Doing the swap algorithm, then undoing it. And you can do the same thing for the V spot. Here doing 2 setup moves instead, and then doing the swap algorithm, then undoing it once again. Of course, there's 12 edges, so it'd usually take a lot longer, but it's the same idea over and over again. But so far, there's always been an even number of swaps. So what if we just had one swap for corners and one swap for edges? So an odd number for each. Well, we could swap one pair of pieces first, let's say the edges. And you'll notice that the dummy pieces haven't swapped back yet, because we didn't do an even number of swaps. In this case, we can use yet another algorithm, the last one, which only swaps both the corner and edge dummy pieces. In this case, this will solve the dummy corners, and then unsolve the dummy edges, which means that when we do the corner swapping algorithm, everything will ultimately solve itself. But of course, we want to solve both the corners and the edges blindfolded. So how are we going to memorize all of these swaps? Well, firstly, we have a letter assigned to every spot and sticker of each piece on the cube, much like how we gave a name to every person and a gift that needs to be given to another person. And you can memorize which piece goes where by using these letters. But while this is done, what people often do is pair up the letters to make sounds, images, or stories out of them. So perhaps for the corners, you could think of a cat getting buff, who is posing in front of his laptop. And for the edges, once again, usually they'd be a lot more like this, in which case you could try and memorize them all in a similar way, or just make a bunch of sounds out of them, which is easier to come up with but harder to recall. But to keep it simple for now, there's just one pair, so you can just think of have. And with just this information, all we need to do is keep on swapping pieces with the middleman to solve the entire puzzle. Sure, it takes a while, and it's definitely not the most efficient way, and if you make a single mistake, you're kinda screwed. But it's amazing how we can just use one simple technique over and over again to solve the entire Rubik's Cube without looking. Of course, faster blindfolded solvers use much more efficient techniques, like what I used when I broke my world records. But that's for another day. Anyway, check out this video next and see ya. Bye.